What's going on, everybody? All right, Wednesday's Q&A day. You know how much I like that. Now, one of the things I wanted to say is don't be shy. If you have a question down below in the comments, please ask that question. You don't have to say, hey, here's my question. You can just type out the question. I'll add it to the list. I appreciate everyone who has asked questions recently. I've got a list of several left, not a ton, but I'm always I try to mix it up. So sometimes you might ask a question this week, it doesn't show up next week, it might be in 2 weeks. A lot of it kind of just depends on the mix of other questions that are out there. Try to keep it interesting so that a lot of the questions aren't the same. Now, that said, my fourth and fifth question this week have a fair amount of overlap with what I'm planning on discussing. So I'm gonna have 4 responses. So I'll have one to the first, second, and third. And then for the fourth and fifth question, I'll kind of combine my responses. But again, down below, please don't hesitate to ask your question for an upcoming episode if there's anything you want to hear my opinions on. We got spring training starting. We've got the guys going back to the ball fields. We've got the weather's starting to get a little bit better. At least it is around here in California. It's getting a little bit warmer. At night, it's not getting as frosty. Things are starting to look pretty good. So I got the home stretch, about 10 more weeks of work before I finally get to shut it down for summer. So excited for that. That said, also, Strongsville. What is Strongsville? 6 weeks away? Something like that, 6 weeks until I get to see a bunch of my friends from around the country. I know that my buddy Chris from Missouri is starting to compile a list. So if you are somebody who's planning on going to Strongsville, I think the dates are April 11th, 12th, and 13th are the show. If you're planning on going, reach out to Chris, let him know. I know he's trying to put together a master list to know kind of what to expect, because there are some things in the works in addition to the 4 collectors trade night that they're hosting as well. So lots of exciting things coming up, and let's take a look at our first question here. Hi, Greg. I asked this question last week and thought I would try it again. What do you think about Tom Brady becoming the majority shareholder of the company store Card Vault, now called Card Vault by Tom Brady? Do you think this will spike the interest of the younger crowd to help the hobby? Okay, so this is a good question, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, I am not a person who's really good at following the current events of what's happening in the hobby or things like that. Now, I hear peripheral things, so sometimes I'll hear a few things like this. I did hear about Tom Brady becoming a major partner in a major card shop company. And then I thought I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys will tell me if I am, I hope, down below, but I think Bobby Witt Jr. just got involved in a card shop type company, if I'm not mistaken. So you got Brady, you got Bobby Witt Jr. A couple years ago, Jeter threw his hat in the ring with, was it Arena Club? I think it was Arena Club for Jeter. That hasn't really taken off. So one of the things I try to look at is when I think what's going to happen in the future is, well, what has happened in the past, right? History kind of tells us what to expect. I'm a little surprised that the stuff that Jeter's been affiliated with didn't have, hasn't kind of grown more than it has. So that kind of surprises me. Does that mean that Tom Brady will not, his card company and this Bobby Witt Jr. thing won't do the same? Maybe. I think grading companies are a lot different than card shops. And I think that if there's a card shop in your area and you hear, oh, this one is partially owned and has the name attached of Tom Brady, it kind of gives it some legitimacy right off the bat. I think the fact that Tom Brady's affiliated with it certainly won't hurt, their allocation of stuff. If Tom Brady's name is on something and Tom Brady calls over to Fanatics and says, we need more allocation, I have a feeling he probably will get it. So for the health of those shops in particular, that's good. I do worry, if I'm being honest with you. I'm kind of a fan of mom and pop type shops. So, like, I had a friend growing up, and his family owned a butcher shop, just a local small butcher shop. And as soon as a Costco and a Sam's Club came into town, and all of the quality meats and the quantity of meats and the price point of the meats of those two big box stores, it kind of ran them out of business. So I do worry a little bit about what about the existing shops in the towns that the Tom Brady stores are going to go into. I think competition is good, but I think if the Tom Brady backing and the extra allocation is going to probably, I would think, happen, what will that do to the competitors in the area? So I think that it does bring some legitimacy to cards. I hope it will add to the growth of cards. I hope that Tom Brady starts to mention some more stuff and, tweet or Instagram more stuff with cards as a result. And if so, I think that there's a trickle down, kind of a grassroots effect of that. So I'm hopeful that this could help legitimize the hobby even more than it already is. So I don't think it'll hurt the industry. I think it has the potential to help the industry. Time will tell, but I just hope he starts showing his face more often around cards. If he starts doing things like going to the National and going to some of the regional shows, and not just the Fanatics event, but some of the regional stuff, because that PR that would result could help the industry. Now we're talking, that might start to move the needle. So I'm hopeful, but it's hard to tell. But I don't think it could hurt the industry as a whole.
Hi, Greg. Hope you're doing well. Here is a question that has two parts to it. On the PSA SGC, or insert a different grading company here that uses the 1 to 10 scale, if money wasn't an object and you were able to pick and choose one specific grade for the cards you would buy, what is it and why? The second part of the question is, what do you think the hobby would look like if the grading companies only authenticated cards and other items, but did not give assigned grades? I know it's not really feasible to make everybody happy, but it seems to me that the purpose and reasoning is just having a third-party opinion and that the item is real. Thanks, Greg.
All right. I really like Andrew's question here a lot. I do think, and I've mentioned this, and my opinion is always changing on some of these things when it comes to grading companies, but I do think we are too hyper-focused on the grade. So what I think Andrew is asking is not necessarily, do you want all 10s or do you want all 9s or do you want all 1s or whatever. I think what he's asking is kind of like, what overall qualities do you look for in cards, and what grade range does that fall into? Because I can't say I want 10s, I want 6s, because that doesn't really mean anything, because I don't think all 6s are the same. I don't think all 10s are the same. I don't think all 10s are the same. That's kind of crazy to say, but I believe that. So my response to this is, if it's a newer card, if it's a card from the late 70s to early 80s to now, I like a sharp looking card that is centered. I want it to be centered. I want it to be sharp. It certainly doesn't have to be a 10. Like, I don't have a need for a 10. I've bought a lot of cards from the 80s that are 8s because an 8 is a really nice looking card. So the number genuinely does not matter to me when it comes to modern cards. The only reason it would matter is because it matters to other people, and other people would potentially want to buy a card from me or whoever ends up with my cards, and then it would apparently be worth more if it had a higher number. So, but you say with price aside, in the question he says, if price is irrelevant, what numbers do you want? I would say anything newish, when card protection is normalized, when quality control has improved, when, the thought of taking care of cards is normal. So mostly modern, I'll say 80s to now. I want a card that looks pretty much pack fresh. It could be an 8, it could be a 9, could be a 10. Doesn't really matter. 8 to 10 is kind of fine for me. That's genuinely how I feel on that. Now, if I sent a card in for grading, I would hope it got a 10, not because it would make me like the card anymore, but it would mean that somebody else might. And then what I would be probably likely to do is then sell that 10 and then buy an 8 or a 9 for a lot less and then have more money for cards. So, but for my collection purposes, that doesn't really matter. Now, I might be different than some people when it comes to older cards. Cards from the 50s and 60s and before, so pre-war, 50s, 60s, to me, if the card is like perfect, it doesn't even look real. Like a T206 card in a 9, that doesn't even look real. That doesn't look real to me. It doesn't tell a story. And part of the reason I like old stuff is because of the story that you just kind of imagine of how it got here. You know, when there's an artifact, you know, when some, you know, when they're doing a dig and they find some dinosaur fossils, like the fact that that was around a long, long time ago is part of what makes it cool. If it looked brand new, if it looked like it just fell out of a T-Rex's mouth, then it almost wouldn't look as cool because it wouldn't tell a story of how old it actually is. So believe it or not, I genuinely would say for pre-war cards, for me personally, I want it to have a little bit of wear. That doesn't mean I want it to be 80, 20, or 90, 10 off center. It doesn't mean I want to crease through the face. I want a nice looking card. Ideally, it would be well centered, but there are times that if it's off centered, it's okay. I want it to be a nice copy to look at. And when you look at it, it actually looks like it's got some age to it, because otherwise it doesn't tell part of the story. And that might make me unique. That might make me normal. I don't know what that makes me, but that's where I stand on pre-war stuff. So if I were to pick a range, again, the number really doesn't matter. But the range for me of if I had to pick one range for pre-war stuff, I would say the 3 to 5, 3 to 4 range, 2 to 4, somewhere between 2 and 5. I guess if you're making me pick something, 3 or 4. Again, not because the number 3 or 4 is what matters, but because generally cards with 3s and 4s have the qualities where they likely don't have a crease, they likely aren't dramatically off center, they likely have some rounding to the corners, and then I can find one in that range that kind of suits my eye. Cards in the 50s and 60s, I would say probably a little bit better because they're not so old. You don't want a card from the 60s to look like it's 200 years old. You want a card from the 60s to look like it's 60 or 70 years old. And so if it's, you know, a 1960 card, I would be totally happy with a card in a 5, 6, 7 sort of range. Again, not because of the number, but because of the qualities. It looks like it has some age to it, but it still looks pretty nice. Now, I totally get why some people would want a 9 or a 10 or an 8 of those cards. I get that. I get wanting one that looks like the pristine example. And I totally respect that. But the older the card, I wouldn't just say I'm okay with it looking to have a little bit of age to it. I genuinely kind of prefer it because to me, it helps tell the story of the card. And if you have a card from the 1800s and it looks like it was just printed, that means it's kind of missing an element of something that I actually like about it. Now, I think that was the only first part of your question. The other part of your question, I'm rambling, sorry. I know, that's what I do. The other part of your question was, what about cards just being graded authentic? I do think the most important aspect of grading is the authenticity of the card. That's the most important part. So when you hear the stories about, one of the grading companies having a card that's fake be authentic, that's the biggest problem, because that's to me, that's the number one most important part. The second most important part, I think, is providing a range of characteristics and qualities of the card. So the problem I have with just doing authentic is that then the person who's buying the card through the mail, online, from a picture, they don't really know as many characteristics. That card could have several surface wrinkles that you can't see in the picture, that the person's going to get it and then be disappointed. So the thing I like about number grades, or at least descriptive terms with the grades, like near mint or X mint or good, gem mint, is it gives you a pretty good idea of, if you see the card is near mint, it's not going to have a crease, it's not going to have a wrinkle, it's not going to have surface wear, it's surface, like missing paper loss. So I like that when they grade it, they give it a range, because that range tells me certain characteristics and certainties. So when I buy it, and then if it meets my eye, great. If it doesn't meet my eye, great. Just because a card has a 7 doesn't mean I'm going to like it. I might like the 4 more because it might have qualities I like more. But the 7, the description of a 7 tells me something that gives me an assurance of the card that I'm buying, that the picture is more likely to be representative of what I'm going to be getting. So it provides a safety. Do I think grading companies are perfect? I don't. Do I think they're pretty darn good and pretty fairly reliable most of the time? I do. I think as a whole, personally, I think grading has been good for the growth of the hobby, because it allows for so many more transactions to take place with a little bit of peace of mind for the buyer. When there are issues, do I want to say something about it? I do, because I want the grading companies to improve. And if I don't say something about it, and they can just do things that aren't really that great, and then nobody says anything, then they might continue to do not great things. So that's kind of where I stand. I actually I don't need it to be number grades, but it could be top third, middle third, bottom third. It could be A, B, C, D, F. It could be 10 through 1. It could be anything, but I like having some description. Even if it said authentic, no creases, no wrinkles, some corner wear. Something like that would be fine. But the things that you can't see when you're not in person are things that I want the grade to include for the people that are out there who are looking to buy a card without seeing it in the flesh.
Here's a scenario. You have a table at a local card show. A 10-year-old is admiring your vintage cards. You give the youth a deal on a group of cards, one that you would not give to an older collector. Fast forward to later in the show, you find out that the cards were flipped. How do you feel about this situation? I understand that the purchaser has the right to do whatever he or she wants with the cards. However, you gave the deal in order to encourage a young collector. Thanks in advance for your response.
This is an interesting question, and based on the details that you're providing, I'm assuming you either experienced this or witnessed this or heard about a story like this. When we do something nice for someone, we'd like to think that they actually appreciated the nice thing that we did for them. If I baked some cookies, which I wouldn't do, but if if Molly, my oldest daughter, baked some cookies, which she would do, and I were to bring them with her over to the next door neighbor, I'd like to believe that they didn't just throw them in the garbage. I'd like to believe that they ate them, that they enjoyed them, that it brought them joy. I would like to believe that they didn't sell them at a bake sale. But at the same time, if they did, it's not that big of a deal to me. When you give a gift or you do something kind, you've now done your part. You've done a good deed. And I think that you then have to release responsibility of the good deed that you've done to the other person, to whatever it is they might do. Now, it's disappointing. Junk Wax Hero, Mike, Junk Wax Hero, he on his Sunday, I want to say it right, Clearing the Bases episode this last week, so just like 3 or 4 days ago, he shared the story of, so if you didn't hear this story, a kid went to a Spurs game and had a jersey on. And after the game, Wemby came over and traded him jerseys. So Wemby gave him his jersey, and the kid gave Wemby the kid's jersey. And they took a picture with Wemby holding the little kid's jersey and the little kid holding Wemby's giant jersey. And it was like a super heartwarming story. And then we come to find out that the parents are having the jersey auctioned off. And when that happened, when that story broke, there was sort of reports that Wemby responded to a tweet or an X or whatever we call them, with sort of like a crying emoji, meaning sad crying, not laughing crying. A sad crying emoji when he heard that the kid was selling the jersey that he gave him. I mean, obviously that was not his intention. When Wemby gave this little kid a jersey, it was not for the family to sell it. It was for the kid to have this treasured item. And at the same time, we don't know the family situation. Maybe this family, was in a bad situation for money. Maybe somebody lost their job. Maybe they were doing it to put in the kid's college fund. We don't really know. But Wemby did a good deed here. Wemby made a good deed by giving this jersey. And then he has to just kind of, in my opinion, release responsibility of it. Now, definitely it's disappointing. Definitely. That wasn't the intent. If Wemby could have just written the family a check. And I think that from Mike's episode, I think that they ended up selling it for around $70,000, $75,000 it auctioned off for. So the family now gets $70,000, $75,000 in cash for the jersey that Wemby gave them. Now, when you do a good deed like this at a card show, when you're like, hey, this is a young collector, I want to get him interested in vintage. I'm going to give him a really good deal because it's going to start his vintage collection. Like, you've done a really cool thing with a really cool intention. And you've done your part. The fact that the person didn't appreciate the deed or take the gift in the way that you intended doesn't mean you didn't do a nice thing. If I mailed Darren a gift, my buddy Return to Collecting Darren, or one of my other pals, Tony, Southern Collector, Mike Petty, or whoever, if I mail them a gift and maybe the gift is a card, and they end up going, I don't want this card. Why did Greg send me another Roger Clemens card? And they decide to sell it. That's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I wanted to do a nice thing for these people. Now, I'm not saying these guys would do it. They probably wouldn't. But if I did this for anyone and I sent anybody something and they decided to sell it, that's okay. If it brings them more joy to have sold it and then whatever they used the money for, then the thing that I provided them, I still did a nice deed. I still showed them that I cared and that I was thinking of them. And whatever they do from there is up to them. So I kind of get why it would be disappointing, but I don't think that I can judge what somebody else does after I've done something nice for them.
Good morning, Greg. Over the past few years, the card companies have kept on coming out with more expensive cards to buy. There are more premium cards with heavy price tags. I've seen boxes of cards well over $500 and real high cards at $10,000 a box, like Topps Transcendent. Jeff Wilson has a video opening one of these premium card boxes with a total of around 10 cards inside and some packs. What do you feel about the idea of the card companies, such as Topps and others, are pricing cards so high they are eliminating the core collectors in the hobby that can't afford these high prices? I don't know of many people that can afford these cards and feel like it's ruining our hobby by pricing out the average collector, such as myself. Love to buy a few cards but can't afford the high price tag. Awesome video as always. I have a question on a topic that I recently found interesting. Here it is mixed with a little statement. With all these refractors, parallels, special cards being worth more money than base cards because of their rarity, it seems like it devalues the base card. I will always feel that the base cards should and always will be worth more. What is your thought? I hope my question and statement makes sense.
Okay, so this one, this fourth and fifth question, I think have a lot of overlap. So I'm going to talk about them together, and I'm going to try to kind of address both things. Now, first, it's mentioned, some of the boxes and some of the cards are so expensive. Aren't we leaving a lot of people out? Aren't we pricing a lot of people out of the hobby when there are boxes that are thousands of dollars for 10 cards? And then the second part, the second question is, haven't we completely devalued the base cards? And I think that, believe it or not, I might take an opinion on this one that might surprise some people. Here's how I look at it. When I grew up, all there was base cards. That's all we had. You'd open 88 Topps packs and you just had the base cards and then some all-star cards. That was it. There weren't any inserts. There weren't any special cards. And then they started having redemption cards. In some of the basketball sets, there were some redemption stuff. In some of the football cards, you could pull like the team card that might have, extra value when you send it in, depending on how the team does, if they win the Super Bowl. There were things that started happening where they started having kind of golden tickets in there. And then Topps had the gold cards and they had the regular cards, and it became more of the Willy Wonka type openings instead of the just traditional way that it was for 100 years before that, right? Now, does that mean it's wrong? I don't think that means it's wrong necessarily. Now, it's sad that a lot of base cards don't really have a ton of value. When you watch these breakers, and occasionally I'll check out breakers just because I find the whole thing is interesting to me. It's like a science experiment that you're watching unfold. Those guys will literally just flip through those first 10 cards in the pack and throw them in the garbage. Like they'll throw them straight into the garbage. And they're really opening the pack for the one or two insert cards or spots where the insert card would be. And then the rest of it is just garbage. And that's sad. That's sad that that's their whole focus. But I also think that the cards like the transcendent cards that are mentioned in the question, those cards aren't designed for someone like me. And they're not designed for a 7-year-old kid who plays Little League and likes baseball and his favorite team is the Brewers. Like, that's not what those are designed for. Those are designed for, like, high-end gamblers because those are designed to be breaks. And they're designed to be expensive breaks. When I walk through a casino, and I'm not a big casino guy, but when I walk through a casino, there's like the room over to the side that says the high limit slots, the high limit room. And I don't walk through there and go, Man, they're ruining the casino because those people can gamble $100 a slot pull instead of 5 cents a slot pull like the ones I play. Like, I don't personally care that that is going on over there. That is for a completely different clientele. When I drive through my neighborhood, okay, so within the community in which I live, there are homes that are $3 or $4 million. And then there are homes that are $600,000. That's kind of the range. The cheapest home is $600,000. The most expensive is $3 or $4 million. My house is probably, I don't know, $700,000 maybe. So I'm on the low end of the spectrum. When I'm driving down the street and I see in the community a $3 million home, I go, man, building that $3 million home just absolutely is making me feel awful about myself, and the whole neighborhood is ruined because of it. That's not the way I look at it. I go, wow, good for that person. They've got a really nice house. And then I keep driving until I get to mine, which isn't, I mean, it's nice, but it's not like that. So I get it, but isn't that part of marketing? Isn't part of marketing having different tiers of options? You know, I would drive on to the car lot and I would look at the Toyota Camry for, $26,000 or whatever they cost. And right next door might be the Lamborghini lot where the cars are $250,000, $300,000. Now, I would never spend $250,000 or $300,000 on a car, but just because someone else would doesn't mean that the Toyota Camry that I might go buy is not a car that is something I should be proud of. So I think what they've done with cards is, instead of having everybody drives a Toyota Camry, they've just made more options. Instead of every house is a track house with the same floor plan that's very affordable on a small lot, some people buy a custom lot and somebody builds a custom house and somebody does more to it. Now, I try really hard, and it's hard at times, but I try really hard to not keep up with the Joneses. I spend a lot of my time in cards in the shallow end. I mean, when I buy a car that's like $300, like, that's a major purchase for me. And there are other people that I'm friends with, there are other people that I talk to all the time where for them a $3,000 purchase isn't a major purchase. And I don't have a single card worth $3,000, not one. And I have a lot of friends who don't have any cards that are worth less than $3,000. That doesn't mean my collection's not great. That doesn't mean that I'm wasting my time. So I think what it does is, it's just the menu has gotten longer. Instead of being at like an In-N-Out or a Chick-fil-A where there's 5 things on the menu, I'm going to a restaurant with 100 things on the menu. And a lot of the things on the menu I don't even look at because it's nowhere near my price range. It's nowhere near my interest level. So I guess what I would respond with is, yeah, it's kind of weird and different than when I grew up, where there was just really the base. It is a much different world, and the modern hobby is much different. But some people, part of the fun of the hobby is buying a break spot and saving up a lot of money to buy one box that might have the golden ticket to get to go to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and most people can't. And occasionally you've got the kid Charlie who gets the golden ticket. And then sometimes you have a rich, spoiled brat like Veruca Salt whose dad has a whole factory of people ripping through Wonka bars trying to get her a golden ticket. So I would just say that we have more options than we've had before. And while some people don't value the base cards, I mean, I just showed 2 days ago, one of the most meaningful cards in my collection is a Topps base paper Matt Manning card that I pulled from a pack. Card isn't, I couldn't, if I put that out at a card show for $0.25, nobody would buy it. But I love it. I love it. And we get to choose where we fall in the spectrum. And some people would never want that card. But I really love that card. I think that having different stratospheres where we all can participate and finding the stratosphere that works for us is a cool option. What I would encourage everyone to do is not place other people's values on how you value something, right? So just because I might watch a break and they just flip through those first 10 cards and throw them in the garbage, they value those as zero. They value those as in their way. They wish those weren't even there. That's not how I value them. There are a lot of chrome base cards that I think are fantastic and would love to have. And my advice to anybody out there that might still be listening to me is just because those breakers don't value those cards and some other collectors don't value those cards, don't let that affect how much you value them. If you like them, then you should go for them. You should go for what you value and what brings you joy. And the fact that other people don't value them makes them more affordable for you. So yes, I think that as a whole, the hobby community doesn't value base cards like they used to. That doesn't mean that you should adopt that same value to your thoughts of those cards. That's my thought. That's my take. I'm never going to buy a transcendent box. I'm never going to buy a spot in a break. I'm never going to be able to afford a mansion. I'm never going to be able to pull a $500 pull on a slot machine in the high limit room. I am perfectly happy sipping my soda, pulling my 5-cent a pull handle, and putting $10 on the San Jose Sharks to beat the New York Islanders for a $10 money line bet. I'm totally content with that. And if other people don't find that exciting, that's fine. As long as I'm happy, I'm all good. That's my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But more importantly, if you have a question for next week, please don't hesitate to ask it down below in the comments.